In this video, we're going to talk about how I learned to fly the Bell 407 and my turbine transition experience.
That's like autopilot, dude.
How do you fly a helicopter? Well, I'm going to show you.
So we will talk about how I learned to fly the 407 and what that experience was like, but we're going to break this video down into a couple parts. We're going to talk about my background, how I got into this turbine job, what the actual training looked like to fly the 407, and then the check ride at the end of the training course. So my background is I graduated high school, I went straight to flight school, I went to Mauna Loa Helicopters in Hawaii, and I did my private commercial instructor, my instrument, and my instrument instructor course out there, and that was about a year and a half, almost 2 years of training. And during that time I was flying the Robinson R22 and the Robinson R44, so those are piston helicopters. Right after I was done with Mauna Loa and I got all my certificates there, I took a job in upstate New York flying as an instructor, and I was flying in the Robinson R22 and the Robinson R44. We did some tours there, like occasional tours where we would fly people around the city, but really not much. It was primarily instruction work in piston aircraft. After that, in my most recent job prior to the one I'm at now, I was working as a flight instructor in the Cabri G2. The Cabri G2 is a great helicopter. It's probably the newest training helicopter on the market and the safest. It's kind of like a Robinson R22. It looks like the same, but it's got the biggest difference is it has a third blade for the rotor system on the main rotor system, and it has a Fenestron tail rotor system. So for a lot of reasons, it's the safest helicopter, and I really enjoyed all of my experiences flying helicopters. A lot of people talk crap about Robinson helicopters and piston helicopters in general, but that's really kind of like, it makes me sick to my stomach when people do that, because if everyone could be flying a nice, big, cool turbine helicopter, obviously everyone would fly that, but that's not practical at all. So everyone has to start with a smaller helicopter, a more affordable helicopter, and Robinsons really fill that role. Like the R22 is a great helicopter to learn how to fly a helicopter in, so I'm really grateful that I got to fly that and slowly, progressively move up to something bigger. And so when I left my most recent job flying the Cabri G2, I had more than 1,500 hours. I was close to 1,600 total flight hours. And so it was time for me to move on to fly something bigger, a cooler helicopter. I really wanted to fly a turbine helicopter, and I wanted to get out of instructing and get into a different sort of helicopter operation. So I started to look for jobs, and I found the company that I am now looking for online. Now, I won't tell you the exact name of the company I work for, but if you do research, I'm sure you can find it. They fly in New York City. We have two primary operations at the company I'm now at. It's tours of New York City, so giving people scenic tours of the area, as well as charters, so flying people from one place to another place. Now, in the New York Northeast area, that can mean a lot of things. A lot of times that's from like downtown Manhattan to an airport, so Manhattan to JFK, John F. Kennedy, or to LaGuardia, to Newark, or to Teterboro, so flying from airport into the city, or maybe flying from one airport to another airport, or flying someone from the city out to the Hamptons on Long Island, or you could go even further. You could go down to Pennsylvania or Boston or Washington, D.C. So flying people where they need to go on a helicopter. Now, the company I work for now has a fleet of Bell 407s. They also have a Bell 206, and they've got a Sikorsky S76. I got trained, and I will be flying the Bell 407 and a couple different versions of the 407. So quickly, if you're just curious about how the interview process went, like I said, I had about 1,500 hours. I put in my application through one of the helicopter job websites. There's a couple. There's JS Firm, which is really good, and there's Just Helicopters, which is also really good. So I don't remember exactly which one the job posting was on, but I applied for it. I got an email from the chief pilot saying, "We read through your resume, would like you to come in for an interview." So I made arrangements to go down for an interview, and it was just like a formal, normal interview, the oral portion where a couple of guys interviewed me and they talked about my background, my qualifications. We talked about the job, how that would look, what you would be doing, what the day looks like, the type of helicopter, the operations, all the business stuff and what the job entails. And then we went out for a flight in the 407. Now, I have to tell you, the first time I ever flew the 407, we were in the pattern at the airport, and there is nothing like that helicopter. It is an incredible helicopter. First off, it's extremely agile. It's very maneuverable, very agile, very quick. It's got tons of power, unbelievable amounts of power. It can fly really fast. And the thing is, it's a big helicopter. It's very big and it's very heavy. It's much heavier than anything I was flying, but also it's extremely light on the controls. So the controls are just buttery smooth. In a Robinson, like an R22 or the Cabri G2, you don't have hydraulics. So you're really you're flying this helicopter, and it's not that heavy, but I mean, you do have to use your muscles to manipulate the controls. The Robinson R44 is hydraulic, so it's a little bit lighter, but nothing like the 407. The 407 is just so incredibly smooth and light. It's light as a feather. And if you think like an R22 is light, it's like, oh my gosh, this is so hard to control. A very large hydraulic helicopter is even lighter, and that was really fun for me. So I remember we were going around in the pattern doing 100 knots, and it was just so smooth, light as a feather, and I was just like, oh, I want this job. So the flight went good. It was just basic flight maneuvers, normal approaches, normal departures, pickup set downs, and they're not looking for you to be competent or good at flying the helicopter. Most people that are coming in for that interview have never flown a 407 or flown whatever the helicopter that the job you're applying to has. What they want to see is that you have general competency and that you can be trained, that you're trainable, that you're not super bad, and that you just have an openness to be taught. You know, another interesting thing for me is I was flying a Cabri, which is a French helicopter, but Bell is obviously an American, well, it's Canadian helicopter, but the rotor systems spin opposite directions. So in the Cabri G2, when you increase collective, you need right pedal as your anti-torque pedal. So you get really comfortable with that. In the Bell helicopter, you increase collective and you need left pedal. So my yaw and my nose as I was applying pedals and collective input, it was a little bit confusing. It was fine because I was trained on the Robinson, which is left pedal, and then I switched to the Cabri, which is right pedal, and now I came back to the Bell. So there's like a slight little delay where your brain has to get back into it, but you know, you just fly the helicopter, and as if your nose is yawing one way, you push the opposite pedal. If it's yawing that way, you push the opposite pedal. So that was just an interesting thing to note. So eventually I got the job and I was absolutely thrilled. So I want to spend some time talking about the training. What did the training look like to fly the 407, and what did it look like to go through a turbine transition course? So the training was set up into 2 weeks. The first week was all ground training, so learning everything on the ground. So learning about the helicopter, learning about the airspace, learning about the company, learning about the operations. But we spent a ton of time on the helicopter, obviously. So how the engine works, limitations, transmission, emergency procedures, systems, everything you need to know about the helicopter. So the first week was ground training, 7 days of ground training. The second week was 7 days of flight training. So going out with the instructor, doing all the maneuvers, and it was about 5 to 7 hours of flight training and then 20 to 30 hours of ground training. Now, just for context, so I came into this job, I went into the interview, went into the training with 1,500 or 1,600 helicopter flight hours, which is not a small number. It's obviously not a ton, but it's not a small number. So I had quite a bit of time in helicopters, and I felt pretty good. I felt pretty comfortable in helicopters, but I was not comfortable with turbine helicopters. I had very limited turbine helicopter experience prior to coming into this job. I had less than 5 hours. I think it was close to 3 hours. So I had a couple opportunities in my duration to fly turbine helicopters, but I really just wasn't comfortable, and I just didn't know that much about them. I knew the general physics of how a turbine engine worked, but it was not clear to me. It was always a little bit confusing. I just had not spent that much time thinking about it. In flight school, we didn't spend that much time talking about it. So I was a little bit, I guess I would say, standoffish, and I was just not clear on what I'd be getting myself into. That sounds kind of weird because it's a helicopter, but I just wasn't clear on turbines. I just didn't feel like I really understood it. So the training, learning about the airspace, the company, the operations, not that bad. But then we spent so much time on the helicopter. So systems, obviously there's a lot more systems in a big Turbine 407 than there is in a Robinson R22. That's par for the course. That's normal. But we spent a lot of time on the turbine, and I guess coming from a piston engine, I really understood how piston engines work. They make clear sense to me. It was fine. No questions, no comments. Like, I got it once I learned it. And I did have questions about turbine engines, but once we went through the training and we went through, like, this is how this works. This connects to this. This pressurizes things here. Super simple. Like, if you are anything like me and you just are not super clear on how it works, or you haven't had anyone explain it to you, they're very simple. They're much simpler than piston engines. It's a great, simple designed engine, and it works, and it makes perfect sense. You know, I really enjoyed my training and really learning about, like, the specifics of the turbine engine and how what connects to what and how the power is made. It was really incredible. You know, I really thoroughly enjoyed it. I felt that I learned everything that I needed to perform the job during my ground training. There was a lot to learn about, like, limitations and stuff. You know, like, I can't remember exactly what an R22 has, but I think an R22 has something like 180 horsepower. And then you're jumping up to, like, the 670 range. You're jumping up into the 600. So you're going from a lot more power, a much bigger aircraft. The limitations, so, like, airspeeds are a lot different. Emergency procedures are a lot different. There's a lot more emergency procedures. Now you've got what's called a FADEC in the 407. FADEC stands for Full Authority Digital Engine Control. So this is like a computer that operates the helicopter, which controls a lot of functions. So understanding how that works, the systems behind that. And overall, I thought the ground training was great. I felt that I knew the aircraft well enough to feel comfortable. And then I got into the flight training. Now, the flight training was great. It was pretty simple. You know, you have, when you come into a turbine job in America, you most likely have a decent amount of experience. At minimum, you've got, like, probably 200 hours, probably closer to 500, 1,000, or 1,500, or even 2,000 hours. So you have a decent amount of experience by the time you get into your first turbine helicopter. Typically, it doesn't have to be like that, but you've got some helicopter experience. So when I started flying the 407, you know, with 1,500 hours, there was a pretty big learning curve because it's a much bigger, much longer, much taller, much heavier aircraft with a lot more systems, and the controls feel a little bit different. But the thing is, it's still a helicopter. It still flies like a helicopter. So the first day was, like, just straight and level, feeling how straight and level, climbs, descents, approaches, takeoffs, pickups, and set down. So that was, like, the first hour. So normal stuff, there was no problem there. You know, it wasn't super clean, and I didn't feel like, I felt really good about this, but overall was fine. Second day, once again, we went out, just did warm-ups, pickup set downs, approaches, max performance takeoffs, quick stops, steep approaches, and then I think we did, like, an auto rotation or something maybe on the second day. Third day, more of the same stuff. Confined areas, stuck pedals, auto rotations, 180-degree auto rotations, instrument approaches. So the third and fourth flight were, like, more of the important stuff. And then, like, the fifth flight was my last flight prior to my check ride. So on this fifth flight, I went up with the instructor and we did everything, all the maneuvers, all the things we could do. There was also one flight, so specifically for me, I fly in New York City and around the island of Manhattan. So Manhattan is like a U-shaped island. It looks like this. And there's a heliport on the west side. There's a heliport on the south tip of Manhattan down here. And there's a heliport on the east side of Manhattan. So on one of the flights, we went down to all the heliports and got comfortable making approaches to the heliports, because that looks a little bit weird because those heliports are tight and there's a lot going on, and you're surrounded by, you're flying in tons of Bravo airspace. You're flying in LaGuardia Bravo, JFK Bravo, Newark Bravo. It's like some of the busiest, if not the busiest airspace in the world. So that was one of the flights. But the fifth flight was with my instructor. We did all the maneuvers, make sure I felt really comfortable. And then at the end of my training course, I had to go for what is called a Part 135 check ride. So in the FAA, in aviation, there's a couple different parts. There's a couple different sections of that you can operate under. A lot of operations are conducted under Part 91. Part 91 is like commercial operations. You can get paid to do stuff, flight instruction, some sorts of tours, and just there's quite a bit that you can do under Part 91. There's two parts that you'll probably be familiar with. So Part 91 is a lot of just a lot of general aviation type of stuff. And then there's part 121. Part 121 is scheduled air carrier flights. So these are scheduled flights. Think of your Delta, American, United, JetBlue, Spirit, Southwest, whatever. These are like, there is a set date with a set aircraft that is going to fly this route. So that is part 121, has certain regulations and obligations and how things will work under part 121. And then there's part 135, which is non-scheduled on-demand air charter service. That's what we do. So we fly charters that are not scheduled, but someone will come to us and say, hey, can you fly us from here to here? And we'll be like, yeah, we can. So they're not scheduled, but they're on-demand charter services. So when people need it, we go out and do it. But we're not saying, hey, we will fly at 9 a.m., 11 a.m., 12 p.m., 2 p.m. from here to there. That would be a scheduled route. We're not doing scheduled route. So if you're operating under part 121 or part 135, there is an additional check ride that you have to take to confirm that you are safe for the operation. Now, this check ride is given by someone within the company. So the company I work at has a part 135 operating certificate. Now, someone at the company can give me the check ride. It's not like an FAA administer, an FAA DPE that comes into the company and gives the check ride. The company can give the check ride. Someone authorized on the 135 certificate can give the 135 check ride. So I went through my check ride, and it was great, pretty uneventful. It's like any typical check ride. There was an oral portion and a flight portion. The oral portion, he asked me all the information about the aircraft. He asked me all about the airspace. He asked me about weather. He asked me about, now specifically like operations and operational control, how we do things legally under 135 in terms of the FAA and how that applies to our company standards and our company compliance agreements and stuff. So all the like business and oral portion about the aircraft, just a regular oral check ride. And then we went for the flight portion. The flight portion was just basically competency. He wants to see that you can do all the maneuvers. So like all the normal maneuvers, you can do all the emergency maneuvers. That's it. You know, it wasn't like a super long check ride. It was, I think, about an hour, maybe a little bit more. Pretty normal check ride, just to see that you're safe and that you can fly this aircraft and that the aircraft is not flying you. And you know, the thing is, you have done 5 or 6 hours of training in this aircraft. So you've done all the ground training, like 20 or 30 or 40 hours of ground training, but you only have like 5 or 6 flight hours. So obviously they're not expecting you to be like super great at it. They don't want you to like look like you've been flying it for like 5 years or 10 years. You're not great at flying it. They just want to see that, like, if an emergency happens, can you handle it? If the aircraft gets away from you, can you get it back? Can you control the aircraft? If the hydraulics fail, can you fly it with the hydraulics off? Which was actually a lot harder than I thought. Because in the Robinson R44, yes, we did some hydraulics off and it wasn't that heavy. And like a 407, it is super heavy. And an A-Star, it is super heavy with the hydraulics off. So they want to see that you can do that. It's just general competency. Obviously, as you fly it more, and now I'm up to like 25 or 30 hours in this helicopter in the 407, and I feel a lot more comfortable with it. I still don't feel like 100% like I did in the Cabri or the Robinson, but I'm sure by 50 or 100 or 200 hours in the 407, I'll feel like, oh yeah, I totally understand this aircraft. All right, so that concludes my rambling rant. Overall, it was a really good experience. I feel incredibly grateful to fly the 407. This is my dream helicopter. There might be a couple other helicopters that I'd like to fly, but if I'm being honest, I think I could see myself in the 407 for the rest of my life, and I'd be happy, and I wouldn't feel like I'm really missing out on much. So I just feel incredibly grateful that I actually have the opportunity to fly this helicopter. It has been a long time in the making. It's been a very long road. To start from not being a helicopter pilot to wanting it, to then going to school and figuring all that out, getting all my ratings, building my time, grinding as a flight instructor, to now finally being able to fly like a turbine helicopter, doing charters, and some tours. It's freaking awesome. I feel incredibly grateful. If you're looking at doing this, please do it. It's a long road, but you can do it and you'll get there. Just keep taking the next step. Keep taking half a step, keep taking a quarter of a step, just keep trying to climb that ladder. And that's what I'm doing right now. I'm still climbing the ladder, getting to where I want to be, but I feel very grateful to have to be flying a turbine helicopter, flying a 407. I'm just really, it's awesome. So if you're looking at doing it, please do it. Please ask me any questions you have. And with that, I will see you guys next time. Take care.